Mitchell, a three is good. Plus the foul. A chance for four. Only three to shoot. Gonna have to make something happen. Clark through the lane, reverses it in. Post feed. Boston. Oh, beats the clock. Wow. Indiana will reset. Clark fire away. You bet.
Hello, Fever fans, and welcome back to the Pacers Fever Show, your home for everything Indiana Fever and Indiana Pacers. I'm Logan, and today we've got a jam-packed preview episode as the Fever gear up for a crucial matchup against the winless Connecticut Sun. Now, don't let that 0-5 record fool you. Connecticut is hungry and desperate to get in the win column, and the Fever, well, they've got something to prove too. After back-to-back losses to the New York Liberty and the Washington Mystics, Indiana needs a bounce-back performance in the worst way possible, not the best way possible, and they'll have to do it without Caitlin Clark, who's out for a few weeks with that quad injury. We'll break down the keys to the game, who needs to step up in Caitlin Clark's absence, and what Indiana must do to avoid becoming the Suns' first victim of the season. All that and more coming up on the Pacers Fever Show. Let's dive in. Game number 6 for the Indiana Fever. They bring a 2-3 record into this matchup against the Connecticut Sun, who again have not won a game this season. They have lost 5 straight to open up the year. That first game they opened up against the Washington Mystic, lose that to 90 to 85. They then go and play the Las Vegas Aces, and they lose that game 87 to 62. At Minnesota in game 3, they lose 76 to 70. At the Dream in the next game in game 4, 79 to 55 loss. And then on Tuesday, May 27th, they lose to the Dallas Wings, 109 to 87. So it has been a really tough go for this Connecticut Sun team, who lost all 5 starters in the offseason, lost head coach Stephanie White to the Indiana Fever. So it will be a reunion for her and DeWanna Bonner as they come to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And the reunion will be a little bit less dramatic, I think, because there's only 2 players left on this roster that played with Stephanie White and DeWanna Bonner. So that will be a little bit of a revenge game for the 2 players that are coming into town. But other than that, this Connecticut Sun looks completely different from the team that we've seen in the past. A team that had gone to the conference semifinals in both years with Stephanie White as the head coach, and Stephanie wins Coach of the Year in 2023 with this Connecticut Sun team. I'm going to do my best not to call them the Suns because of the Phoenix Suns, but it's so hard to leave it as plural. I can tell you that from experience, but I will also call them the Suns when I'm also talking about them in the possessive way. So what to watch for? We're going to get into that. Caitlin Clark update, what the Phoenix Sun have done. Sorry, there I go. I've already done it. Mixing them up with the Phoenix Suns. You need to change your name, Connecticut. Connecticut Sun, what they've done in the offseason to overhaul this roster, and it looks a lot different than it has in years past. So what does that look like? They've got a new head coach that's come in and I think is got the resume to be successful in this league, and I think are going to have Connecticut going in the right direction. But I think for years to come, they are going to be in full rebuild mode, and I think are destined for the bottom of that league for years to come as well, just because there are so many pieces that they are missing. And with some of the veteran players that they still have left over, I think that there's still going to be some shifting around for this Sun team. But we'll get into that, what Stephanie White and DeWanna Bonner can do as they step back in against this Connecticut Sun team at home when a must-needed win, for the Indiana Fever. They have lost 2 straight now, and they definitely don't want to make it 3 straight against a Connecticut Sun team that is struggling mightily to find any kind of success, and really I think is going to be the story of the season, them finding any type of positives or success to take out of this, just because it is in tank mode. It is in we hope to get the first round pick and build our franchise from there. They're also an impending for sale team, pending sale team, I guess you could call them. Yeah, so a lot of things happening in Connecticut, but let's jump into it. So Caitlin Clark she is still out with that quad strain, and she has been seen going through preparation to try to rehab that quad strain. And I know there's been a lot of brushback on X because they've seen Caitlin Clark taking some shots and in pregame and doing some of the exercises that she needs to do to stay fresh. But ultimately, she's not exerting a whole lot of stress, I think, on that quad. And with quad injuries, I think the biggest thing is obviously you don't want to be running around, and she's not really running around. She's just going through her motions as far as getting shots up, and there's a little bit of light jogging, but I don't think it's anything. And this training staff knows what they're doing. They're going to get her back into the game as soon as they can. And I think if it's not early in the season, if this is towards the postseason, Caitlin probably misses a week. But you just don't know the severity of that injury. You don't know how much of this is the Indiana Fever front office and training staff, coaching staff being very cautious with their star player and their franchise, and there's so much on the line with that. And she, obviously a torn quad or something of that nature would be devastating for Caitlin. As we've seen, quad injuries can be very difficult to bounce back from. We've got a lot of experience with that on the NBA side with Victor Oladipo. We saw what that did to him, and that pretty much limited his career for the rest of the time that he was in the NBA, and then is currently sitting on the sidelines, still wanting to play. But I mean, it really just came unraveled for Victor when that quad injury happened. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want to rupture anything and cause even more issues for a player that's got obviously aspirations to be one of the best players, not only in this league, but in the history of the WNBA, and has the talent, the skills, the ability, the personality to be an absolute juggernaut in this league and for this Indiana franchise for decade at this point. So again, they're just going to be very cautious with Caitlin. I do not blame them. And we'll see what updates come out over the next week or so as she starts to get back into game form and when she starts to do some light on court work. And then that'll ramp up into scrimmaging, hopefully. But again, it said 2 weeks for sure. It could be more, just depending on how she feels as she starts to work her way back into things. But she's already been out a couple of days already, so that time frame is shrinking. But it definitely sounds like she's going to miss the next 3 games, where the Fever have a lighter schedule, a schedule I think that they can win some games without Caitlin. That did not get off to a real good start on Wednesday, as they lost to the Washington Mystics on the road in Baltimore, 83-77, led by 21 points from Dewana Bonner, who really stepped up after not really starting the season very well in that starting role. But since she's come off the bench, she has been an absolute force, and a former Connecticut Sun player who will have some extra juice, I think, going up against her former team and Stephanie White's former team that they will take on Friday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on the Ion channel. So if you don't know what Ion is, you can find it usually on Hulu. It's also on YouTube TV that I saw, Fubo, and I think with an Amazon Prime subscription, I think there are some users that are able to get the Ion network. And I actually saw it. I have a Samsung Smart TV. There's like a free Samsung channel or channels, and Ion is actually, I think, one of the ones that is featured as one of the main channels that you get for free when you do have a Samsung TV. So excited to see what the Fever can do against a Connecticut Sun team that is really struggling. That I think is a good game to get them back on the right scent and get back towards the way they were playing against the other team. I mean, they had a really good game against the New York Liberty when Caitlin Clark did go down with that quad injury, and she was hobbled in that game. But I thought that they played them extremely well, and it was a game that we were hoping to grow from and really learn from. And I thought it was a launching point for the rest of the season. But we get the awful news of Caitlin Clark's injury. It's not as severe as hopefully as we thought it might have been when we first heard it. But I think that they're just going to take it day by day with Caitlin, just so that they can make sure that she's healthy for the rest of the season, as this team will look to contend for a title. I think a dark horse contender when you open up the season. I think that they were right around that 4 or 5 mark when people were predicting them in the regular season predictions and how they would finish the rest of the season. And I think that they thought that they were going to be a 4 or 5 seed. in the upcoming playoffs. But the road starts now, and they really need to start to play well, as they are now 5 games into the season. There are 39 games left, and they're going to be without Caitlin Clark for at least 3 of the next games, it looks like. So, I mean, that's going to be 8 games out of your season. You're already a fifth of the way through the year almost when Caitlin Clark returns. So they're going to want to take advantage of all the opportunities that they have. And this is a big opportunity coming back home against a Connecticut team that's really struggling. And then their next games are actually after really long breaks. They don't play again until Tuesday, June 3rd. So that is, you get Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. So that's 3 games in, or 3 days in between games there. And then they also have another break similar to that, where next Tuesday, after they play the Mystics, they have another 3-day break where they don't play Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They go to Chicago on Saturday, the 7th. So only 3 games in the next 2 weeks, which is really good for not only Caitlin Clark and getting back healthy, but really good for this team that has struggled and could use some time, I think, to practice and iron out some of these issues that they've had. And Sophie Cunningham said that they do have practice today. So it'll be interesting to see what they walk through. They're going to watch film today, and probably a real light practice, but trying to understand where it went wrong against the Washington Mystics. And if you look back at that game, like I said in the last episode, it was really 3 things. I think it came down to 3 things. Getting crushed in the paint. I mean, you cannot get beat by that much in the paint as the Fever did. I think they got beat by 16 points. It was like a 48-32 advantage for the Mystics in the paint, but they also out rebounded the Fever. They got a more second chance opportunities and points. I think they had 11 fast break points, and the Fever had 0. So just not sustainable the way that the Fever played. A lot of it was due to the lack of intensity and just having a game plan. And then not having Caitlin Clark is such a huge issue for this team, because they don't really have that backup point guard that's really proven that they can lead this offense. It's a good offense, but I think that there is a limit to what Sydney Colson and Sophie Cunningham can do at the point guard position. And then I think as a secondary ball handler, Kelsey Mitchell can be serviceable, but it's not her strength being that secondary ball handler, or that, honestly, the lead point guard at times, because Colson got into foul trouble and so did Sophie Cunningham. It left a lot on Kelsey Mitchell to orchestrate an offense, which is not really her thing. So again, I think there's a lot of things that you could take away from that Mystics game, but really it came down to Mystics wanted it more. They were hungrier. They were younger. They were out in transition more. They played what the Fever want to play, but the Fever just couldn't keep up with it. And they just had all sorts of issues creating offense after about that first quarter. So the Fever looking to bounce back against a team that is one of the worst in the league. But that being said, they're going to be hungry for their first win. So you can't take this team lightly, and you've got to come out and handle your business at home, because if they lose this game, there's going to be a lot of questions surrounding this team at the start of the season. And it's not really the pressure that this team will want early on in the year, but it will be attention that will be deserved if they drop this game to the Sun. So what to watch for with the Connecticut Sun? The Sun, who were the number 3 seed, bowed out of the 2024 postseason in the semifinals, despite taking Minnesota the distance in their best-of-5 series. It was the final stand for the franchise as we know it, as the team loses Stephanie White and its entire starting 5, including franchise stalwart Alyssa Thomas this offseason. And Rashid Mezion is now stepping in as the new head coach. That will only feature 2 players from last year's team, in Marina Mabry and Olivia Nelson Udoda. Yeah, Udoda. And those are the only 2 players returning from last year's team. So again, bench players. The Sun lose all 5 of their starters. So those 2 are stepping into starting roles and will feature in their starting lineup come Friday. But again, this is going to be a younger team that's going to rely on some of their younger players. But really, the Sun don't really have access to their first-round picks. They don't really have anything to kind of boast in 2026 as they're going to start to rebuild this team. They're going to hope for some of these veteran players to be assets, I think, at the trade deadline and what they can do to move them on in the offseason next season. But this Sun team is just in a mess just by the ownership not being stable and looking to sell the team. They're looking to get somebody in that understands how to build a team from scratch after having two very successful seasons in 23 and 24. This is going to be a really difficult year for Connecticut and already started out to be a difficult year. And it's just going to continue to go, I think. Several young players to build around without much pressure to win now. The Sun can focus on helping 2025 draft selections, Anissa Morrow and Sanaya Rivers transition from college to the WNBA. Connecticut also has 2024 draftees JC Sheldon, who was acquired this offseason from Dallas via trade, and Layla Lacan, who is a crucial part and foundation of this team, but she is still in France playing in the French league and has not made her commitment or her debut to the Sun yet. But there is obviously hopes that she's going to make her way over here in the foreseeable future and could be a really good asset to this team. But again, young players that this franchise is really going to have to try to build around. Their biggest concern, though, is there's really a lack of star power. The Sun became the first team in WNBA history and in NBA history since starters were first tracked in 1970 to 1971. So in both leagues, this has never happened where they've lost all 5 starters from the final playoff game of their previous season. And that's in both men's and women's league. Their most prominent players now are veteran forward Tina Charles and Marina Mabry as standout guard. The Sun are leaning on a lot of players who are young or don't have a whole lot of WNBA experience. The thing that they'll be talking about as the Sun continue down the stretch and down throughout the year is the future of the franchise. So news broke that Mohegan hired investment bank Allen and Company to explore the sale of the franchise and all options to strategically invest in the team. In the words of team president Jennifer Rizzotti, although the players and the coaching staff said they were focused on only basketball, you can't help but wonder what lies ahead for this team, for this city where they play. And honestly, I mean, if you're looking at this franchise, what happens with them? How do they rebuild this? And they don't have control over their 2026 first round pick. So that's going to be really tough. And to build this team, you're going to need draft assets. So does that look like a team that's necessarily built for the future? No. And with question marks around ownership and them looking to either sell the franchise or, you know, what can they do with the investments that they've made in this team that don't look good? It's pretty grim in Connecticut for this team. And that's why I think it's so crucial for this Fever team to bounce back and win a big game here, because the Sun have just so little to really play for, and to start 0-5 is demoralizing. And the more you lose, the worse this situation is going to get with young players that don't have much experience in this league. I think it's going to be just so incredibly tough for this Connecticut team to put anything together this season. And I mean, honestly, you look at this team and it could be disastrous in the way that they're challenging for some of the worst teams in the WNBA history just by their win-loss record. And the teams are only getting better above them. And there's a lot of separation happening between the bottom teams of the WNBA and the top teams. And you hope that they get some draft picks, but when you don't have draft capital until 2026, that's going to be a huge issue for this Connecticut team. So again, the Sun don't control their 2026 pick because that sits with Chicago, as it was a swap pick, meaning that the Sun likely won't get to draft in next year's draft at a high draft pick. And that's just, I mean, it's got to be bleak. Think about this as a fan base, right? I mean, we've been so fortunate as Fever fans to have the opportunity to get Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark in the same, at the same position in that number 1 overall pick in 2 straight drafts. So I think it's just going to be a really hard year and really hard future for this Connecticut Sun team. I mean, there's just so many issues that we can continue to talk about. But like I said, that's why Stephanie White leaves. DeWanna Bonner saw the writing on the wall. I mean, you get rid of all 5 starting players because the franchise is trying to figure out in what direction it wants to go. And I mean, it's not, you know, they had some older players, and Alyssa Thomas is a really good basketball player. But I think at the end of the day, Connecticut saw it as an opportunity to scratch surface and go. And they did. They told DeWanna Bonner and Stephanie White go touch grass, and they did. And And now the Fever benefit from it because DeWanna Bonner has been really good in the last 2 games. Stephanie White is the top head coach in this league and won Coach of the Year in 2023. She had a win-loss record of 27-13 in that year. And then 2024, she actually improved a game and was in the 40 games, was 28-12. Lost in the semifinals in both of those seasons. And, that's continual success. But when you're going up against a Lynx team or a Liberty team that's been as good as they've been, and the Aces as good as they've been too, last couple of champions that they've had to try to take down, and then a promising team in Minnesota last year, I just feel like that was a short leash for Stephanie, and Stephanie wanting to go back home and moved here because she, for different reasons, left Connecticut. It just left Connecticut high and dry as Stephanie decides to leave, and it's tough. Not that they told her to go touch grass because she ends up leaving anyways, but it just feels like Connecticut. Stephanie saw the writing on the wall, decides to leave because once she leaves, and it's just the franchise is in disarray, and it's just a tough place to be, I think, as a fan of this team because of the success that they had behind Stephanie White. She was there for 2 years. DeWanna Bonner was there for 5 seasons since 2020, and has been really good for that team since going over there. She actually had 19.7 points per game in her first year, in her debut year with the Sun, and since then has just really done well offensively and led that team to the promised land and being a really good team in this league. It's just unfortunate watching Connecticut go up in flames as it has in this offseason, and there's just not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel for this team. So again, feeling down about a lot of things. They've got a good head coach, but I just feel like there's so much working against them that this is definitely a team that the Fever are going to want to capitalize against. So just kind of looking at the standings right now, so we get a better understanding of where Connecticut and the Fever sit. In first place, the Minnesota Lynx have not lost a game yet. They're 5-0. They're in that 1 spot. The Liberty have not lost a game either. They're in the number 2 spot at 4-0. Phoenix is 4-1, and they sit in the 3rd spot. The Atlanta Dreams are in are in 4th, 4-2. In the 5th spot are the Seattle Storm at 3-2. Golden State, the new expansion club, sit in 6th place at 2-2. Las Vegas 2-2 in the 7th spot. The Mystics are in 8th at 3-3. Fever 2-3 in the 9th spot. The Los Angeles Sparks are 2-4 in the 10th. Dallas Wings are 1-4 in the 11th. The Chicago Sky 0-4 in that 12th spot, and then the Connecticut Sun are 13th. So they are dead last behind the Chicago Sky and are 0-5. And Chicago's got some young and promising players, obviously Angel Reese being one of them. But I feel like Connecticut, they do have some strong young players, but it just doesn't seem like the system's going to go that well. And when the ownership group is halfway out the door at this point, it feels like Connecticut is in for a very long couple of years here. So again, Fever not doing so well. They're out of the playoffs as you look at it in 5 games. They are in the 9th spot. 8 teams get into the WNBA playoffs. There's 44 games, so a lot of time left, obviously. And I'm not too concerned when Caitlin Clark gets back. This is a playoff team. But the way that they've played lately, it's not been great. It's not felt good. I think that there are some glaring weaknesses in this team that we can talk about heading into this preview, but also throughout the season. We're going to be continuing to discuss the themes for this team, and those will a lot of times be the keys to these games that we're going to talk about, because it's a younger team. They've got a lot of younger players that are star players, but still trying to figure out the league. And I think there are some things that other teams can provide and do that really challenge this Fever team as currently constructed. I still think they're missing a piece, maybe 2. So we will talk about that as we continue down the road. But I did want to get into this game that's actually going to happen on Friday. So like I said, Stephanie White and DeWanna Bonner reunion game. So look for DeWanna to have a really good game in this contest. She's been excellent lately. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she can do against her old team. She did have a really good game in that last one against the Mystics, where again she had 21 points, which was big because it kept them in the game when they needed it the most. I mean, the Fever were really struggling finding any kind of scoring and reliable source of energy on the offensive end. She only had 2 points against the Liberty back on the 24th. The Wanabonner did, and had featured in the starting lineup up until that Liberty game where she went to the bench and had struggled throughout the season. But what a great game for her and I thought she was okay in the Liberty game. I think she added some things that they need. They had, some rebounds and some size in that second unit. But to see her score 21, I think as a Fever fan, you got to feel pretty good about that. And Fever player to get that production off the bench, where if she can give you 10 points a night off the bench and grab some rebounds, and she creates a lot of problems just with her size alone too. I think it helps spell Aaliyah Boston and Natasha Howard, because there are some bigger players in this league that cause those two some challenges. And we'll talk about that because that was the case with the Mystics as well. I think you've got to assert your presence in this game, Aaliyah Boston and Natasha. I feel like there's got to be a focus on getting those two involved again, because they are such good players, post players. And, there's been some issues with size that they've had to go up against, like a Stephanie Colson. So I just feel like, or sorry, not Stephanie Colson. That's not the Sydney Colson is the Fever player. Stephanie Dolson. Yeah, that's why it gets confusing. Stephanie Dolson with the Mystics, and then Kiki Irafin also caused them all sorts of problems. So we will focus on the big matchup between the Sun and the Fever, because I feel like that's somewhere where Indiana's just not been as good, or is controlling the paint. And on a lot of that's Aaliyah Boston and Natasha Howard, Dewana Bonner as well, and then Dantas. I just feel like there could be more emphasis on defending the paint, and I think they've got the players to do it. I just feel like it's not gone as well defending those positions. So looking at a preview for this one, I just feel like the Fever, talent-wise, have the better team. I feel like looking up and down the roster for Connecticut, they're just not as talented. Obviously, Tina Charles is a very good big down low, and I feel like you've got to take care of the basketball and get your possessions in and challenge her as much as you can in the paint. Try to get her in foul trouble. Obviously, Olivia Nelson Udoda is going. That's a really hard name to say all in once. She's going to be great in this one. She scores pretty well, and I think with her size, that'll be something that the Fever are going to struggle with. Tina and Olivia are both very big, so you're going to have to once again rely on Aaliyah Boston and Natasha Howard, stay out of foul trouble. I mean, that was a big thing in the last game as well. If you're going to beat this team, you're going to do it with your bigs, and I feel like they keep running up against lineups that are just, they cause them so many issues, and I think this is going to be another one with Tina Charles and Olivia. I just feel like the size that they have can present a challenge for Aaliyah Boston. And then the other thing too is the effectiveness of Aaliyah Boston without Caitlin Clark is very noticeable. The pick and roll is just not as sharp, obviously, with Sydney Colson and Aaliyah Boston. I feel like there are times where it just looks pedestrian, and not a knock against Sydney, but Sydney is a backup point guard. She's a backup guard in this league for a reason, and Caitlin Clark is one of the best players in this league for a reason, because of her ability to be able to create difficult matchups for the switches off the pick and roll, but also her ability to get to the rim off of a pick and roll or get to an open shot. There are so many things you have to deal with when Caitlin Clark is running off a pick and roll of Aaliyah Boston or Natasha Howard or even Alexi Hull or Sophie Cunningham pick, There are so many moving aspects to that and how to defend it because of Caitlin Clark's ability to just fly off the screen and hit a very quick 3-point jumper. And her range is through the roof. Obviously, she can hit them from the logos. So you have to worry so much about defending that. It's such a difficult task to do, where Sydney Colson doesn't have that range at all. And it's very difficult. The only thing you really worry about with Sydney is she's very quick, can get to the rim. She's obviously a smaller guard, but I think she's got some abilities that play well off of Caitlin coming off the floor. But as a starting point guard in this league, I just feel like it's a struggle when you're missing and that's any team. You take any team, when you take out the starting point guard, that's a tough ask. That's like taking your quarterback out. That's like taking a starting pitcher down, or a shortstop in baseball or softball. Like, when you're missing your best player, your floor general, your captain, that's ultimately where things start to go south. And that's been a problem for this Fever team. They've just looked so different without Caitlin Clark on the floor. And in our last episode, we did talk about this, but without Caitlin Clark, the Fever average 87.7 points per 100 possessions. With Caitlin Clark on the field, or sorry, on the floor, I was talking about baseball and stuff, and I got confused. Indiana averages 107.5 points per 100 possessions with Caitlin Clark on the floor. So a 20-point difference when she's off of it per 100 possessions. That's a very noticeable gap. And I think that's where the Fever really do miss having a floor general type point guard. And, Sydney Colson's a good veteran presence and backup point guard, but they just need a secondary ball handler, which I feel like at times, where do you go with that, right? I mean, Kelsey Mitchell can do it some, but that's not her strength. And actually, I think it causes more of a stagnant offense and less pace when you rely on that. The Fever need another explosive guard, I think, to handle the ball handling duties and running the offense at times when Caitlin's taken out of possessions, because we've seen that too, where when teams have face guarded Caitlin Clark and have taken the ball out of her hands at half court and guarding her 90 feet up the floor, it's very difficult for Caitlin to get involved. And then the offense goes silent because Caitlin's not involved. So yes, it hurts obviously not having one of the best players in the league, but you got to be able to weather that storm some. And I just feel like right now the Fever don't have that answer. How do they weather that storm without a really good backup point guard? We've not seen that yet. So we'll see what they do as trades can happen, and maybe Sydney Colson learns the offense and we get more production. There were some flashes of moments where I thought she was good last night, but there were also times where it left a lot to be desired. Same thing with Sophie Cunningham, not quite the ball handler that Sydney Colson is, or Caitlin Clark, even Kelsey Mitchell. I think Sophie Cunningham struggles at times when she's being pressured full court or half court full pressure. It seemed like it would just stop the ball. So a lot of dribbling yesterday. And when Aaliyah Boston isn't getting the ball where she likes to get it, where Caitlin likes to deliver it, that takes her effectiveness away too. And average, she'd be right around that 10 or 11 points per game mark, where she's usually upwards of, 17, 20. It really hurts not having Caitlin to be able to tear down a defense. And you see that every single game that she's not out there now. So, and it's only been one. And I don't mean every single game, but like the one game she's not been out there in her college career and NBA or WNBA career, it's been not great. So looking at the Connecticut Sun, because, what does this team look like on paper? So the Sun are last in scoring at 71.8 points per game. Field goal percentage, they are second to last. They are, 11th out of 13th, 39% from the field. And 3-point percentage, they are second to last in that one at 28%. Free throws attempted, again, not great. They're an 8th in the league at 20.4. Free throw percentage, this is where they're okay, like middle of the pack, 77.5% from the free throw line. When you talk about percentages, not a good defensive rebounding or offensive rebounding team. 33.6 total rebounds per game, and the Fever are 38.2. They're third in the league. The Fever are The Sun are 10. So I think that's where you have a big advantage. Another big advantage that they'll have is that Connecticut turns the ball over typically more than Indiana. Indiana's not been good in that category, though, and I think that's a really important thing that we'll talk about as far as a key to the game and the possession battle. But this team, again, is very beatable, and their starting lineup is not obviously not as deep and talented as the other starting lineups that you've been up against. And if you look at some of their star players and who you're going to have to concern yourself with, I mean, Connecticut doesn't have the Brittany Sykes or the Ryan Howards or Sabrina Ionescu type players. They don't really have anybody that's going to stuff a stat sheet as much. You obviously have a very good player in Tina Charles, who averages 17 points per game, and that's good in this league. But I still feel like if that's your best shot, I mean, that's when you notice the depth extremely lower than the other starting lineups in this league. Marina Mabry, 14.2 points per game. Olivia Nelson, Udoba. I'm never going to get that right because it's when I look at it, it feels wrong saying it, Udoda, but I think that's right. Like it looks wrong, but 10.6 points per game. Bria Hartley, 8.4. She's really good off the bench. Like she hits a lot of threes. You got to be careful with her. I mean, by a lot, I mean round two per game. She shoots it at a really high clip too, at 41%. And again, she's a good bench option. But other than that, I mean, the next high scorer is Sanaya Rivers, who's at 8 points per game. JC Sheldon, 5.4 points per game. Haley Peters, 4.4. So the scoring drops off tremendously, and especially with these younger players like their rookie Anissa Morrow at 2 points per game in the 3 games she's played. So it's tough sledding for this team to find scoring when it's not coming from Tina Charles or Marina Mabry. I mean, those are the ones that are really going to truly crush you. But again, good players. I just feel like after that, though, just the depth and the lack of scoring that they have, their ability to defend is not great either. And I feel the Fever have a tremendous advantage and a really good shot here to get back on track just because of how good they've been offensively in games, right? They're still, I mean, you look at this Fever team who are 2-3 and, you know, they've struggled to beat good teams and they've had a pretty good stretch of teams here that they've had to play. But when you look at the stats, especially in not only their wins, but I guess stats across the board, and you look at their points per game, it's still really good. They're third in the league at 85.8. Obviously, they took a hit here with Caitlin down, and they'll take a hit here, but they're still one of the top scoring teams in this league. They have one of the best paces in this league as well. They don't shoot the three a whole lot and don't shoot it as effectively as other teams do. They're 10th in both at 3-point percentage and 3-point pointers made. But I still feel like in the mid-range and in the post, that's where they're most effective, with Aaliyah Boston and Natasha Howard being very good in that range, and Lexi Hull hitting a lot of mid-range shots too and can hit the three. Caitlin Clark obviously can get to the paint and the rim, but also hits tons of threes. But when she's missing, you know, what does that look like when she's out of the lineup? So a lot of things to be positive about as the Fever head into this game. The Sun really struggle to defend, and I think are just going to get worn out with the depth that Indiana has compared to them and just the pace in which they're going to want to play at. And the Fever being very angry off of their loss to the Mystics, I think there's going to be a whole lot of things working positively for the Fever. I wouldn't be shocked if this is a 20-point win for Indiana, as I would expect it to be, at least a 10-point win, and to get them back on the track and at 500 once again. And like I said, their schedule lightens up to where they're going to have a pretty good stretch right here, where the Mystics are a good up-and-coming team, but I still think they can beat the Mystics even without Caitlin. And then the Sky just haven't been good. That is in Chicago, though, because after that, they've got 2 really tough games against the Atlanta Dream at Atlanta on June 10th, and then they'll host the Liberty again on June 14th. So very tough games coming up after those stretches. So a good shot here for the Fever. Again, they're at 2-3, sitting right outside the playoffs without Caitlin Clark for the foreseeable future. And they're going to look to create more offensively. And I think now that you've got more time to prepare an offense without Caitlin, you're going to have a better shot. And Sydney Colson's still learning the offense and still learning that system. She, again, was a veteran addition that they made. The more games that she gets under her belt, the better she's going to be. She's obviously not a star, but I think a serviceable backup. I still think they're missing a couple of things that could use some more scoring and maybe a good shooter off the bench or somebody that's going to provide the ability to be a secondary ball handler at times. And then their size has just been good at some points, and then other times they've just gotten run over by other teams and their bigs. And I think that's obviously Tina Charles presents quite a matchup. And, I wouldn't be shocked if she goes over 20 just because Indiana has struggled against bigs in these games. So that'll be interesting to watch. If I had to watch keys of the game, just does not look, the offense, or sorry, I'm reading takeaways. That's the wrong section. Keys to the game. Points in the paint, that's going to be big. Try to limit the amount of points that Connecticut's going to try to get with Tina Charles and Olivia in the paint. I just feel like both of them could really do some damage against the bigs for Indiana because Boston and Howard have struggled at times defending the bigs in the paint. Getting into a rhythm, again, a lot less dribbling, more getting the ball moving and less stagnant. Try to not ISO every single time you get the ball. Kelsey Mitchell, I think hitting more shots is going to be more important for Kelsey, but there are still some times where the shot taking and shot decisions are a little bit questionable because it's just not in the flow of the offense for some of these players. And then last, but certainly not least, intensity and focus. I just feel like there's a lack of intensity with this team so far in the regular season where, one, they've had a hard time putting teams away when they needed to put them away, but it's also like they've let the other team dictate the pace, the tempo, the intensity, and physicality that's going to be played with. And that's never going to be good if you allow the other team to do what they want because they're going to play their game. And even though you might beat them, you're still allowing them to be comfortable in the game. The Fever need to do a much better job at getting out and running like Stephanie White wants them to, get the ball moving, a lot more team basketball, less isolation. And they really need to do that without Caitlin around because that's going to get them more shots and more freedom in that offense. It just looks so stagnant and discombobulated without her so far. So we will see if it turns up being better. And pace is good, right? Pace is always good, but it needs to be better. That's my second key. And then the last key, veterans need to step up in her absence. So like I said, Kelsey Mitchell is going to have a better shooting game, obviously. Aaliyah Boston, although not a veteran, but now more experienced than what she was, obviously. In her first 2 years, she needs to be better and get more involved. I think, 11 points, 10 points, that's just not going to do it with Caitlin on the sideline. I think she's got to be more assertive in her role and her ability because I feel like she's just such a tremendous talent that you got to get her more involved. And then you got to get, production like you've been getting from DeWanna Bonner, but also Natasha Howard, chipping in more. Lexi Hull, Sophie Cunningham being better. So I think you're going to get that from all the veterans. I'm not concerned about any of them, really. Bonner I had questions about, but, she seems to be fine now. So we'll see what happens with her and if she continues in that bench role or what happens in the lineup. And I don't know. It'll be interesting because the Fever still have a lot of growth and learning to do. But I also feel like this team has got the bones there to be a very good team to challenge for a title and be right there in the mix. So will be interesting to see what position they're in when Caitlin does return, where they are in the standings and what that looks like. But again, still early in the season, 5 games. We'll have probably played 8 or 9 games by the time Caitlin comes back. So you've only played about a fourth or just under a fourth of the games in the season. So not a huge loss, but definitely not good when you're missing CC for this long. And we hope that she gets back as soon as possible. So let me know your comments below. What do you think the Pacers? There I go. This is so hard because I do both shows. I mix everything up. But what do you think the Fever do against the Connecticut Sun? Do you think they get a win on Friday night? How many points do you think Aaliyah Boston has or DeWanna Bonner against her old team? What do you think the margin of win is if you think the Fever are going to win it? You think they're going to lose it? If you're Connecticut Sun fan watching this, what do you think they are going to do in this game? Who are some players that we got to watch out for? Let me know in the comments below. Again, we're over on YouTube. If you want to see the rundown of each of the shows and all the talking points and graphics that I have, head over to YouTube and subscribe, comment, and like. Helps people find us that are Fever fans or anybody that are fans of basketball or the WNBA, and hopefully we can grow this league and grow this channel. And we're also covering the Indiana Pacers and their run through the Eastern Conference Finals. They are up 3-1 against the New York Knicks, and they play on Thursday, tomorrow. They play against the New York Knicks in Game 5 tomorrow at the Garden. So we will be covering that as well, and we've been covering them all along. We'll cover both of them throughout their seasons, postseasons, off seasons, and we'll do all sorts of different fun videos. But right now, it's just so hectic with the Pacers making their deep run and the Fever playing simultaneously. It's a lot harder to get some of these episodes in a timely fashion, just because I feel like I'm jumping from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and it can be exhausting. But it's a lot of fun. I'd rather be exhausted in watching both of these teams than not watching both of these teams at this point. So looking forward to covering both of these teams going forward. We are over on anywhere you can find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, whatever it might be, iHeartRadio. We can be found there. Still looking for a co-host. So if you're interested in joining the show as a co-host for the Fever, co-host for the Pacers, co-host for both of them, if you want to just be a spot guest where I have you on every once in a while, that works too. If you're interested, let me know. Send me a comment over on X or on Facebook. That's where I'm most active in posting. You can also send me an email at thepacersfevershow@gmail.com. We are on all socials at the Pacer Fever Show on X and Facebook. I'm going to hopefully get the TikTok going with the Fever season. It's a lot more work just trying to get all that incorporated into it. And then Instagram, I don't really use that much. So we do have a profile, but I don't really post as much over there. And it's harder to keep up with it because it just doesn't get as much attention as other things do for podcasts. So that being said, if you're interested in letting me know through those social platforms, you can just send me a message, and I will check Instagram messages too over on Instagram every once in a while. So if you're interested in joining the show, just let me know if you want to be a guest as well. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Rate us over on podcast, wherever you find your podcast. Apple, if you give us 5 stars, or Spotify, give us 5 stars, leave a review, helps people find us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time as we recap this Indiana Fever versus Connecticut Sun game that is happening again on Friday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on ION TV.